So we are here today to really talk about biodiversity versus land needs. Now, imagine a world where we could look at a piece of land and understand its biodiversity value, its ability to provide development for houses, etc., its ability to deliver to nature through flood resistance, all those sort of good stuff, rewigglings of rivers, beavers, etc., but also to produce land and produce food. But that doesn't really exist at the moment. And I am Donna Lyndsay. I am Business Development Director for Map Impact. And we firmly believe in a world where geospatial and Earth observation data can really help deliver some of those solutions. Okay, where we can really start understanding what is going on the land and putting that information into the hands of those people who really need to make those key decisions. Now, I am very pleased to say that we believe this is probably for the first time that we have 4 competing sectors on the stage to discuss this particular issue. Whoa! So we have Tim Hopkins, who is CEO of Landapp, and he's representing the farmers and the landowners. We have Simon Nigh, who is partner and head of digital innovation at Jonas. He's representing the developer community. We have Kirsty Wilman, who is COFO, I hope I got that right, of Rebalanced Earth, who would deliver nature-based solutions. And last but not least, we have Hannah Cool, who is COO of Bankers for Net Zero, and she's representing the financial community. Now, all of these are competing requirements on our land, okay? So we're going to talk around what are those key needs we have, what are the problem areas, the barriers, and how do potentially we overcome these. So we've only got 30 minutes to go through all of that. So without further ado, I'm going to jump over to Tim. Tim, can you just introduce yourself and your Landapp proposition? And what are those key challenges you see around producing food and profit for the farming community?
Is that working? Yes. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Tim Hopkin, founder of Landapp. And just quick context. So I was brought up on a family farm, so 90 acres just south of Guildford in Surrey. Saw firsthand how infuriating it was or how difficult it was to make good decisions on the farm. I studied regenerative agriculture and permaculture about 14 years ago. And when I tried to apply that to the farm, it was basically impossible without some form of tooling. I had to do everything on Google Earth and paper maps, which is obviously incredibly inefficient. And so it became very clear that, most of the world's land is managed by farmers in some way, right? And I saw firsthand how difficult it is to make progressive decisions. You tend to be driven by market forces. And at the moment, as everyone will be aware, is that, farmers really only get paid for the food that they produce, so the amount of milk, the amount of potatoes. And so the market incentives are to essentially extract as much as you possibly can from the assets that you have, because obviously you've got to send your kids to school, you've got to keep the lights on, you don't want to have to lose that often family asset. And it felt to me that what's happening is the market forces are undermining the long-term resilience of land, as we're starting to see, right? With climate events, all of a sudden farms are exposed to drought and flood and wildfire and all these, frankly stupid things. And this isn't new, right? This has happened for millennia, overgrazing, et cetera, et cetera. So as civilization grows, so we overconsume, and so we end up, bearing the brunt of those decisions. And so I felt that something like Landapp, which gave farmers the ability to understand what they have, what the market will pay them to do, and I'll get to that in a second, and then design plans that can be appraised and valued. So what is the biodiversity value of putting in an agroforestry plot, or how much will government pay you to put in riparian buffers? All of a sudden, we could reduce the barrier for farmers to make progressive, well-considered decisions. Because often what happens is farmers have to pay a lot of consultancy fees before they can work out how much they're going to get funded, and they lose that cash without knowing they're going to get a return off it. So I thought if we could reduce the time to value, reduce the cost burden, we can actually have a lot of farmers making progressive decisions very quickly. And just quickly, is we're working with Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Asda, who want more resilience in their supply chain. So basically they are onboarding all of the farmers in their British supply chain to use Landapp. We're appraising the resilience with 68 metrics of resilience. You can see some of that on our website. And that's helping the supermarkets actually push incentives down to the farmers to become resilient, because we have to acknowledge that there are market forces that drive CFO decision-making, right? It's often about competitive advantage and profit. And so we have to be cognizant that investment into land and nature will really be resilient, because CFOs and treasuries can get behind that concept. So appraising the resilience of land and the ecosystem services in the concept of resilience is actually how we can drive positive markets, because philanthropy and goodwill will only take us so far. Carbon markets will only take us so far. We need real resilience markets to invest in proper resilience on the farm and make it easy for land managers to respond to it. So, yeah,
Thanks, Tim. And I know you're really passionate about this subject. So we're going to move on now to Simon Nigh, from the partner and head of digital innovation of Jonas. And Simon, you're going to really talk to us about how developers are seeing the challenge of biodiversity, particularly in terms of the requirement for 1.5 million homes to be built in the next 5 years.
Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, first off, well, a bit about myself. I'm more the tech guy that's representing property rather than the property guy that's now in the tech role. But yeah, we at Jonas, we're 160 years of representing landowners. Ultimately, it's our core business, and we've extended that out, and that's the developer community as well, and how we utilize the land, but also take the complexity out of it for the landowner. And I think that for us is sort of key mission that we're trying to achieve. And I guess that brings me into what the challenges are is across the board is we've got challenges for the landowner in that there are so many different tools, data sets to actually work out what your biodiversity net gain offering is as a landowner. Although there's supposed to be one metric, we've seen various different calculations, all varying dependent on the source of the information used, whether that is connected through satellite, whether that is ecologists on the ground, the whole gamut of different resolutions that go into that calculation causes some major issues. From a property developer perspective, you're split between, you've got some really big developers there who perhaps don't have too much of an issue with financing off-site credits and the like, but you also have some equally smaller developers who really struggle. And that's where we start to see that the applications for the LPA, they're trying to cram loads of biodiversity improvements onto a single planning application because they've got to make that 10%. And the schemes themselves are unachievable. They can't be managed. They won't last that 30-year period that they need to. And they also simply take the confidence out of the whole scheme as well, and that's really the key thing. And we don't want to be going down the route where with carbon and the like, where there is that loss of faith in the marketplace. And then I guess sort of the last point is things like how it's actually recorded and where DEFRA fits into all of this. Because if you look at how the credits are actually registered, and that in itself, the whole platform needs complete overhaul. You can only search by an LPA, you can only search through the biodiversity type. There's no spatial searching, and some of the actual credits that are registered in one LPA are a completely different zone, a completely different area. So all of these challenges in the scheme and how it's regulated and how the standards-based approach needs to happen, we need a national program on which to enable that data capture and the organisation and the validation of the credits.
Yep. Thanks, Simon. So we'll now move on to Kirsty. So you've heard these two challenges, Kirsty, particularly around market failures and all that sort of stuff like that. So Kirsty, can you summarise your role at Rebalanced Earth and what Rebalanced Earth are trying to achieve, and how does the nature-based solutions actually interact with these two sectors?
Yeah, sure. So at Rebalance Earth, what we are doing is launching a fund to invest in the restoration of nature to provide resilience. So recognising that nature provides ecosystem services that we should value, we probably don't, but putting a value on those and encouraging the recipients of those services to pay for them. Now, that might be in the form of carbon credits or biodiversity net gain, or it might be a payment for an ecosystem service. But everything that we do centres around creating resilience, not generating credits or biodiversity net gain for the sake of it. And it is hugely challenging and hugely complex. We are obviously a small island with a limited amount of land. We've got massively competing priorities, but fundamental to the core of it is that we have to have resilience. So we want UK growth, we want to increase productivity. All of these things need physical resilience. Housing developments need physical resilience. Farmers need physical resilience. And what we've recognised is that we can't operate in one lane. So we're all looking at competing uses for the land, but actually we all have to work in a really collaborative manner to be able to achieve what we want to achieve. And one of our biggest challenges, and actually Tim and I were just having a fascinating conversation about it because his product's fantastic. I just did that little pitch for you. But one of the massive problems is data. So what we don't know, we don't have an agreed standard. There isn't one type of project. This isn't a homogenous product. So you can't say on this project we measure this and we'll measure the same thing on the next project and now we can compare the two projects, because they're doing different things. They'll have different outcomes. The expectation of what they achieve is different. You have to have really good baselining because you don't know what you've achieved without that really good baselining. And I think we've fallen into a trap. My background is real estate, and I was very involved in ESG in a real estate portfolio. And I think there's a real trap of data for the sake of data. So we've collected all this data, we've written it down in an annual report, it's gone to all of our investors, aren't we brilliant? And we're missing a trick of like, what does that mean? What can we do with that data? What's the next step? So let's stop congratulating ourselves for going, you know, we're producing less carbon. Aren't we good? We've ticked the box and we've told our investors. But actually what we should be doing is saying, how did we do that? What worked? What didn't? And what should we be doing next? And where should we have got to? Is it a success or could it have been better? And I think at the moment there is difficulty because we don't have that convergence of standards. It's a nascent market. We're all learning as we go, and that's okay. But I think there is a real need to learn collectively if we want to make a significant difference.
Thanks, Kirsty. So, Hannah, over to you. You've heard the problems that these three sectors are expressing, the challenges and the need for data, but not more data. It's better data that's used for better ways. From the financier point of view, what does your sector need to see to actually help you finance a lot of this activity?
Okay, big question. Also, hello at the back. Can you hear us all right? Oh, great. Wonderful. What you just said, Kirsty, it's bang on. My sector, the banking sector, needs to trust the information that's being sent to them. And at the moment, we are in a spiral of asking for more and more information, thinking the more information we get, the more we can trust it. But it's completely the opposite. We need to go back to basic principles. Simplify, standardize. And I hate to be the person that's like, we need standards, but we kind of do.
Yeah.
Right? And if I think about the work that we're doing, it has become a reporting exercise. And we have a very simple message at Bankers for Net Zero, which convenes the kind of UK finance ecosystem. We need less reporting, but better data. And those two things are not mutually exclusive, right? And they are different, actually, in terms of we can't just govern top down, because where is impact? Where is risk? It's through supply chains. It's through portfolios. It's on the farms. And we are not getting to the point where we understand what's happening on the farm. So I work genuinely. I know you might not believe me, but I do work with some brilliant banks that care. They do. And I work with banks that desperately want to innovate new products to incentivize behaviors and outcomes from the farms that they work with. They do not have the information to do that. It is a compliance reporting exercise at the moment. So the work that we are doing is how can we take a marketplace, how can we take a sector and get everyone to agree what the standard is? Now, farms are difficult. We've entered on a really difficult sector. But if we take the foundational data points that most SMEs, irrespective of sector, will need to provide, we can start to build the building blocks of a data ecosystem in our marketplace, which is where we need to get to. So the work we're doing is working with government on a building blocks data standard, starting with what energy do you actually use? And we need to move away from a point where we are now, which is the more you look, the more you share. To a certain extent, the worse you look. We need to get to a point where it is risk, right? So if you're not sharing information, you are a higher risk. You don't get access to financial incentives. You don't get access to new and better financial products. That is the journey that we're on. And the fact that we're having this conversation now, we are going to get there, right? The question is, how quickly can we get there? Because this is an imperative. So any questions, feel free to ask.
Thanks, Hannah. And we actually have gone through that relatively quick. So I am actually going to ask you just all a really quick question before we open it to the room. So we understand all that, and we understand about, you know, the need for the data. And actually, some of the things that we've seen in our industry is actually there's a real disconnect between geospatial intelligence and the financial systems that need to actually use that analysis, etc. So, Tim, just really quickly, from your point of view, what do you think we need to do to connect that piece?
Yeah, I think it's what everyone has said. We need standards because, you know, there's no point me speaking to you in, you know, I don't know, another language. You won't understand it. And I think that's where the sector is at the moment. It's just this gobbledygook that means that no decisions are made. And we personally think that UK HAB may as well be the spatial data language that's used, because you get the, you know, primary language, you get the condition, you get the context, and then you can convert that into biodiversity net gain. You can convert it into resilience metrics. You know, food retailers can use it, processors can use it, banks can use it. So we believe the whole market, public and private investment, should all be built on one data standard, which may as well be UK HAB, because it just happens to have those, you know, attributes. And then, yeah, you can just add, you know, further attribute those polygons or that data with more information. So I think the critical component is let's just speak the same language, because then decisions can be made and action can outcome from that. So,
yeah, can I just chuck in really quickly? There is a massive and growing gap between those that are tech and data savvy and genuinely understand what a true data ecosystem should look like, and access to transactional data through the system, and those that regulate and govern and run the standards authorities. So we need to play a role where we translate the two. And the UK has a major opportunity to be the data hub of the world, accessing transactional data, being more efficient and making better decisions.
Yeah, leading on from that, I totally agree. In 2 points. One, yes, we need to simplify, and we totally, you know, because you're dealing with landowners, we're also dealing with policymakers, and it's got to be clear cut for both exactly what we mean when we say it, so that decisions can be made on that. Equally, we've got the need to have that, to get that data out there, to have a consistent data layer that everybody uses, rather than a single source of truth, rather than the mismatch of different data sets that we have at the moment. Okay, and that needs DEFRA to support primarily, but government digital services to enable as well. And then that way we can then have a bit, you know, we've seen schemes like NUAR, the National Underground Assets Register. We need one of those for nature.
Absolutely.
I think we also need simplicity. Yes. And maybe I shouldn't admit this. I'm an accountant. I'm a board director, and I've got non-exec role. I have spent years in investment management. I can read a set of accounts, I can read TNFD reporting, a sustainability report, and I can get to the end and think, I don't know what I've just read. And I think we've managed to complicate it so much that at the end you read it all and go, well, so what? What have I read? Why does it matter? Is that good? Is that bad? And I think if we can't understand it, in the industry that is producing this, if we can't understand it, then we can't expect other people to understand it and do something about it. So I just think we need to, I mean, it goes back to simplify, but explain it properly and explain the so what.
Yeah.
And exactly to that point, it's why the top-down regulation doesn't work. It has to be bottom-up. So the smallest businesses in our ecosystem, if they cannot share data, and by data I mean system-based, like quantifiable, has the ability to be verified, unless they can share data and they understand what that data set is, it doesn't matter. I actually don't think it matters at this point, because we need to build through the system bottom up and not be asking for things that actually the fundamentals of our business ecosystem can't provide.
Yeah.
Love it.
And I think this can be really simple, because if you imagine hovering over Britain and looking down, you've got, obviously you can see the land, and of course that's converted into OS Master Map, which is already done. You know, we've all paid as taxpayers a lot of money to get that built over time, and if that's all converted into UK HAB, so it's then a consistent data language. All it is that freeholders or tenants just have their bit of that puzzle.
Yeah.
And and then they go, okay, cool, this is my little bit, I'll verify it. So it was unverified, now it's verified, it's got the BNG scores, all those other things that come automatically. And then they do their thing, design their future, and then, you know, it'll go to the bank, the 2 food retailers I send it to DEFRA, to MHCLG, to the local planning authority. So you only have essentially The people that own the block of land are the ones that verify that data and then push from that place to the third parties.
It's got to be about consent,
Yeah.
right? Because at the moment, if you publish a report and it's in the ether, you no longer have control over your information, your story. That data is important to you. If it's owned in a central hub and you validate and you consent that through, and then it's, produce once or verify once, share many.
Yeah.
And it's not just the banks that need it, it's insurers,
Yeah.
right? And we need to move to a world where insurers are understanding the risk properly, which means, those that don't share are perceived as a higher risk potentially,
But that's where we need it connected to the planet. And as you all know, that's something that we're really all trying to work on, because the problem is that the financial systems do not know where their assets are that they're investing in that's causing these issues. So they don't actually know where to look in the first place. So you've got all that top down, bottom up issue. Hannah's desperately trying to come in. Okay.
I was going to say, I think that's absolutely spot on. And even when financial institutions know where their assets are, they don't understand the physical risk.
Yes.
And there's reports coming out left, right and centre basically saying we haven't priced in physical resilience into any of our physical assets. So the potential next, we've had COVID and the credit crunch and God knows what else over the last few years. The next one coming is we're ignoring physical resilience, and it's going to hit us hard if we don't hurry up and do something about it.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think we've got some real nasties coming around the corner. It's that wicked problem we've always talked about. Now, just really quickly jump in. We've got 10 more minutes. So just quickly come in, and then we're going to open it to the audience for any questions. Okay. So Simon, did you want to jump in quickly? Okay. So are there any questions? Obviously, you've seen the passion of the panel here. We are all really here trying to think around the problem spaces that we currently have. As far as we are concerned, it has to be spatially oriented. It has to be systems thinking. It has to be connected right across the different systems to make sure we know what we're doing with the planet. So are there any burning questions associated with what these panelists have said today? No. Okay.
Hi there. Thank you. That was a really fascinating discussion. So a couple of questions, slightly linked. So the government recently published a land use consultation that closed at the end of April. So firstly, are you expecting that to solve any of the problems that you've discussed? And secondly, the delta that you described, Hannah, between the policy and the data, who are you looking to solve that problem?
Yeah. Well, I was lucky enough to introduce Steve Reed at the launch of the land use framework, and we're working very closely with DEFRA, and it's the perfect framework to start to bring these things together because it includes housing as well as nature and farming and all that stuff. The challenge will be, and it'll go to the policy component. Okay, cool. It's clear and obvious what we need to do. How the hell do we get there as a system level? And I think it has to be a collaboration between the public and private sector. And the way we think is if we can get data standards like HMRC have created making tax digital, they set some data standards, but the private sector can push those data standards like a VAT return into HMRC. All of a sudden, you can leverage the benefit and the value of government, which is the national register, the rule-based system, and the private sector innovation to make sure you get activity happening on the ground. So I think the land use framework would come together well if we have this standardized data format. I won't get into the incentive side of it, but yeah, and then we can basically leverage the best of the public and private sector to have a harmonized system.
So thank you for the question. So there is a smart data bill, which is being drafted and looking to be pushed through government, which we are looking to build into and help educate the policy leads that are working on that bill. But the way that we see it is this is such a complicated topic that unless we take bite-sized chunks that government can understand and we build the foundations, we're just never going to get there. Like we've been, and I hate to be really negative. I'm never negative on these sorts of panels, but it is like, how do we take the smallest stepping stones first? And when it comes to almost data pro formas and data standards, that's kind of where our focus is at the moment, which then builds, if you like, the context and the foundations to build open data platforms and leverage the smart data policy. So for SMEs at the moment, we're building out a data pro forma, which is foundational across every sector, simply for energy usage. Now, obviously, that doesn't hit the mark here when it comes to land use data, when it comes to understanding farming risk and agricultural practices. But what it does do is it starts to say, unless you as an SME can provide actual system-based information, it shouldn't matter And big organizations should not be asking for it, and they should not be ad-libbing. And at that point, you, one, massively reduce the noise in the marketplace, and two, you create an incentive or a prioritization, which is validated data. And then you can get credit ratings agents, banks, everyone starting to build out systems and data capture mechanisms, which push us towards an open data landscape. And I know it's kind of like, how many bites of the apple can we take? But we've gone back to kind of basics here. Yeah. So, sorry, to answer your question, the technology and smart data bill, but also DBT, DEFRA and DESNES.
Thank you. And I think we've got time for just one more quick question. Anybody else? Yep.
So talking about simplicity and standards, would a UK-wide master map-based UK hub attributed with BNG units, carbon stock and carbon flux be a useful tool?
Yeah, so OS master map just available essentially in this language. Yeah, I mean, we as taxpayers have already paid for the damn data, like, I think. Yeah, how it's licensed, but they know they need to open it. So our argument is that farmers get paid public money to deliver public goods, right? And so they should fall under the public sector government agreement, and therefore they should access master map for free. But it should be in the language of UK hub because it means you can make decisions off it. Yeah, OS are keen for it, DEFRA are happy to pay for it, Treasury are keen for it as well. It's just like, how the hell do you get everyone in the same room and just get something done?
But yeah, some of the challenges are around all these different data silos. I mean, the data exists, technology exists. It's just a case of just pulling it all together.
Well, we've done that. We should talk because we've done exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, expand on that point. I totally agree. It needs expansion of the current PSGA agreement. You know, fundamentally, that's what's needed, not just for landowners, farmers, but also for housing as well. I mean, we're getting the same issues across housing associations, the planners, local planning authority, although they still have all access to PSGA, content, they just don't have the time. So it comes back to that simplicity point. They're overburdened themselves, the planning authorities.
So we haven't got time for any more questions, but I'm just going to ask the panel, because we've got in the audience here probably people who can help solve this problem. You've all got geospatial skills, most of you I suspect. So just a quick question to everybody on the panel. What action would you like to see taken by this group here?
I'm happy to start. Mine isn't a geospatial action though. Mine is a more general action to think about, we've got huge consumer power in how we spend our money. So we're looking at investing institutional money in restoring nature, but actually we each individually can make a difference. And it's funny, it's one of those things that someone said this to me the other day and it really struck. It's easy to do, so it's easy not to do. But just thinking about how you spend your money and whether that aligns with your values. So where is your pension invested? What, are you buying a coffee in a disposable cup? All of those tiny, tiny things that are tiny and in themselves don't matter. But if we all do something, it makes a difference. So not quite geospatial, but on the theme.
Yep.
Yeah.
So mine is geospatial, but it's coming at it with not my Carter Jonas hat on. It's coming with my AGI director's hat on, and we're all geospatial professionals. I assume so, and that we wouldn't necessarily be here or interested in this topic. So it's about bringing communities together to discuss these topics, to get the standards out there, to make these decisions, and use organisations like the AGI as part of that process.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I totally agree with these. I think if those are technically minded, leveraging AI to appraise risk more accurately related to reality is probably how we're going to drive positive markets. I think AI's got to be used to interpret data to drive well-justified investment decisions. Yeah, we need that kind of consistency. So it's kind of the actuarial abilities of appraising risk from spatial data, I think, will drive investment into land use change.
Just to add, if you as an organization have an opinion on the data we need, the data flows we need, or the data standards, please reach out, because we need to show to government that we can convene as a marketplace and go to government with an answer, because otherwise it just won't happen.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So this is just the beginning of this conversation. Okay. We as a group are really passionate about what we are talking about.
We're starting a podcast next week.
On a podcast next week.
No, we're not. I'm joking.
But we will continue this and we will keep on driving government to make the right choices. So please reach out to any of us if you want to get involved or help us create this better use of land. So thank you very much. And thank you to all of our panelists.